Hello and welcome to episode 6 of AI Mavens, the show that brings you all the news and some deep dives into how to apply AI to your business. Dave, how are you doing today? First recording of the new year.
I'm fantastic, Peter. It's great to be here. How are you?
I'm excellent. New year 2025. Wow. You know,
It still feels fresh in your mouth, right?
it
It's hard to
feels it
say.
feels
It doesn't
weird.
roll off the
Yes.
tongue
Yeah,
yet.
25. It's I feel like I finally have arrived in this millennia somehow.
It's a quarter century in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Crazy, crazy. You had a good start to the new year?
I did. Yeah. Got outside and enjoyed the weather. And then it got really cold. And so I'm back inside.
Back inside, back inside. Good time to record a new episode of our
Indeed.
show. Great, good to have you. So let's get started right away with our first news topic. Dave, you picked something for us.
Yeah. So Deepseek, which is a Chinese AI lab, has released a new open source model. And there's all these restrictions that the US has placed and sanctions around China to kind of restrict their growth and development, but they're really fast following. And so a lot of the US AI lead thinkers have said that it's recording and performing as well as all the other tools on math tests, the things you can evaluate, is performing really well. It's also a lot smaller. And in their evaluation, they say that they took 1/10 of the training time, so 10% of the training time to produce this. So they're really producing some incredible models over there and releasing them as open source. So a lot of people are, tweeting and saying all these messages around OpenAI and Anthropic are dead, but I don't think that's the case. Have you tried any of these models, Peter?
I haven't tried that new model yet, but I've been reading about it and hearing about it, and I'm curious to try it. Probably we get into it this week, but the interesting thing about it is that this new model, DeepSeek R1, is essentially competing on the capability measure with OpenAI's latest models, including O1, and then some voices that have tested it kind of to the bones in comparison say that it's not quite at the level of O1 Pro, which is the very expensive compute model of OpenAI, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I think O1 Pro is $200 a month or something, which is fascinating because they're still, while they're charging a significant price tag, they're still not making any money on it because they underestimated just how much those pro users would be using the tool. So the amount of compute is greatly outstripping the cost of that is outstripping what they'd make for a profit on it. But I think while DeepSeek is on all of the benchmark tests winning, I still think there's a huge opportunity for open AI and the ease of tools and use because there are some nerd researchers who will install DeepSeek and open source models. But for most of us who have ChatGPT on our phones, are we really going to install an open source model or keep using some sort of a subscription based service for this? What's your opinion on that, Peter?
I think there's so many layers in that. So yes, some nerds and probably many of them will download, install it locally, and run it locally. Um, of course, the in the political current landscape, while that's not our focus of this show, we still have to bring in how much that is an issue in this case. Like, do we actually know who is behind this model in terms of organizationally from within China? Who's the creator of the model?
Yeah, I guess we know who's behind the DeepSeek lab,
Hmm.
but we know it's also a Chinese company. So if I was a US company operating and I was going to install an open source model, I'd be pretty careful before just installing this without a careful check through its code base to better understand. And even then, would I fully trust it with if it's the Pentagon, someone like that? I doubt that they would use this tool in their ecosystem.
Yeah, and also, like, how hard would it be to train any sleeper behavior into a model like this that you can activate at any time, that kind of stuff. Like, I think that would be a major security risk for most operations in the Western world, in North America. However, I think what this shows, and this is the more interesting part to me, is that this apparent moat that these large model companies are supposedly building around themselves in research and in development doesn't seem to be quite that deep and wide to protect them from international global competition. So that's kind of the proof. We don't know how many resources China had to throw behind this, but it's clearly a sign that the Chinese labs are sending, saying, look, guys, your billion-dollar, trillion-dollar investments might not quite be leading to something that is, I wouldn't say that special, because it's clearly special what's coming out of these models, but that is impossible to copy and maybe even exceed in the future. So I think that's the interesting message that came out of this whole thing in the market. And so you mentioned in our conversation before that you're curious now what's going to happen to the next version of Llama, because that would show whether, you know, they're all kind of getting to similar results in terms of top line performance, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting next thing to watch for. For OpenAI or for Llama, if they had a model they were about to release, and DeepSeek has released this high performing model, if a Llama 4 wasn't better, now they're in a really tough situation. So I'm curious to see as Llama comes out, is produced from North America here in the U.S. Is that something that corporations would find more palatable? Can they trust that any more than they would trust DeepSeek? And so in that, I think it'll be curious to see what performance they come out. But if OpenAI or Meta are releasing these models and they can't beat DeepSeek, this R1 model has just been released, I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation to watch as well, because while these measures are arguably relevant or not, it's that kind of ChatGPT experience we've all had where you can talk with it and be conversant with it, which is really magical. How well it scores on a math test, how relevant is that really? For some people, sure, it's really relevant. But what is that next milestone we're going to experience? Reasoning's certainly part of it. But what is the next thing we're going to experience as these models start to explore? That's where I'm curious to watch.
Yeah, and maybe a closing thought on this news item would be, to me, it clearly looks to me like we're going further down the trail of the commoditization of these models. Now, the long tail question in there would still be: is this truly commoditizing the market, or is it the strategy of scorched earth by China to trying to diminish the value of the North American research labs? I think that's still to be seen, and whether it's true or not entirely, that they had way less resources to invest in terms of training time and training compute, etc., etc. I think that's one of the most interesting parts to watch. The good thing for the market is, I think, that these models become more accessible, and more competition is not necessarily a bad thing. In terms of the market having multiple options, as well as some pressure for not one company to run away essentially with the golden prize. And I think that's a very important thing in the global development of AI technologies, Dave.
I totally agree, and I think it'll be really curious to see what happens next. Like, Google has their 99% monopoly, and there's no one from search that can kind of assail that.
Mm-hmm.
But in this space, that we're seeing that the walls are scalable. And what I'm really curious about is in the labs, like a lot of people who are in these labs at OpenAI and other places say we're really close to AGI.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird to be in this lab and see all the things that are coming and not have everyone think that AGI is around the corner. But from the outside, we look and we say, well, these tools, sure, they can give you an answer. They're a little better than Google, but they're not, artificial general intelligence yet.
Right.
So I'm curious, in each of these labs, how far ahead of the game are they, and based on what they've released versus what they have in their secret drawers.
Right.
That's where I'm really curious to see, is DeepSeek far ahead and only releasing these models as an interest, or are they just scrambling to keep up? I think that'll be a really interesting thing we see over time in terms of how these companies continue to evolve.
Okay, so let me throw a challenge to you then, Dave.
Okay.
A small little detour before we move to the next news item. I know you're not really comfortable with making predictions, but what's your prediction? What do you think? What do you think? Are they close? Like, is there something to all this hype of the last few weeks over the holidays and in the new year? All these proclamations that we're really close to AGI. What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny that like you're right. I think, but that I'm going to be wrong is an easy prediction. Whenever I say I know that I'm going to be wrong, but in that, what I hear really fascinating in the language is we're really close. We're like 18 months or less than 2 years away, which is that prediction timeline of if it's next month, that's one thing, but within 2 years is sort of that's a hype prediction from my perspective,
right?
Because it's far enough in the future that you could maybe kind of be right, and no one's going to remember in 2 years anyway. And it's not like next month or close by. So to me, that is just salacious and hype in terms of what I'm hearing in that. I think the actual OpenAI definition of AGI that they've got documented, has leaked recently, is when they can make $500 million in service revenue. So I don't think that is something that is the definition of AGI is something that we would all need to agree on first before we can actually have that kind of a conversation.
That's correct. So then let me throw out the urbanized conspiracy theory here. So what you're essentially saying, if I translate that into my urban code, is it's more about keeping evaluations up than the true arrival potentially of AGI. Yeah. All right.
Their business.
Their business. Yes. Let's not forget. All right. Then next news item is that Microsoft CoPilot agents out of Microsoft CoPilot are now able to see your screens and therefore interact with the content on your screen. Is that that's something we've grappled with before with different other tools that were sort of automating screen activity by monitoring your screen, and then you can basically prompt the AI or an AI agent to do certain things. Dave, what's your experience with this so far? This is an announcement. Is that correct? Is that already in production?
That's correct. Yeah. So depending on what version of CoPilot you have, their CoPilot Pro version has this new feature. This is something Anthropic launched a few months ago, so it's not a new feature or functionality. But for a developer in a lab to try this out, they had a lot of sandbox caveats to say, be careful how you use this, et cetera, et cetera. This is CoPilot now rolling it out for any Microsoft user that wants to pay for this service. It can watch your screen and help respond and act on what it's seeing on your screen, which for me raises this big question that we're all going to have to grapple with: is what is it okay to look at on your screen? What of your documents should you look at? If it's my personal information, my medical information comes up, or I get a text from my kids, I just got a text from someone, a notification. Can the AI see that, respond to it? Do I want them to? If I'm in the corporate environment and looking at financials, and I think of how we flip back and forth to items on our screen, if I'm booking a trip and then suddenly I get an update that there's fraud or something in my organization, or someone sends me an HR update in my company, do I want all of that in this Microsoft Pro interface that's going to OpenAI? What are they going to do with that? I think it opens up some really interesting questions for us to grapple with about how this works.
Right. And then, of course, it also provides a new attack vector, essentially, for potential security intrusions. Essentially, if someone gets a hold of this tool that now has the right to access your screens, of course, this could be abused as well, right? And someone like Microsoft, you would hope that they put the sufficient security measures around it, but then there's also tons of Microsoft-based systems around the world that get hacked and intruded. So so it's a tough thing, because I think it's one of the smart ways of enabling automation in a way that integrates systems let's say, the easy way, because of course reading off of a screen is much easier than building APIs to every single system that you operate on your screen in order to automate further things. So I think this is going to be a bit of a wrestle over the next few years to see, okay, how much does that make sense? And I've set myself a goal actually to set up a separate machine here, a separate computer to test some of those agents interacting via the screen share, and then see how they do and how they go. And I guess it's subjectively maybe then still hard to assess how much you can trust these platforms and these tools, but it's going to be part of our lives, I think, at least partially. I would assume that it would allow for selecting specific windows to share instead of the entire screen, which would make me more comfortable in working with them. Let's say if you have an e-commerce page, or you have a data sheet or something like that, and you want that to be manipulated in some way, you can kind of sandbox that into that one window. But that would make the most sense to begin with, right, Dave?
100%. Just like you're sharing in Zoom or Microsoft or any of the tools, you pick the window and those tools are there.
Right.
It's the same problem we have carrying cameras and microphones around in our pocket all day long. Do we trust that the device is only recording what we want? I think all of us have experienced the idea of mentioning some weird product like avocados that you've never talked about, and suddenly you're getting ads for avocados all the time. And there's a bit of a lack of trust that those devices are not listening at times.
Right.
I think that's the thing we'll have to encounter in this, that the UI will figure out how to select just what you're looking at.
Right.
But can you trust that service that that's all it's looking at? And then what happens with that information? And that assumes that the human beings in the loop, myself included, that you're not making a mistake, that I didn't pick the wrong window. How many of us have shared the wrong window in Zoom? If we do that, how do we undo that? Like if I've shared sensitive corporate financial information, what then? So I think that's more of the problem that I see. Like hacking is certainly a possibility. Intrusion and security is going to be a need. This is just a new information resource that we're going to have to figure out what the norms of this are and what that looks like.
Exactly. And by the way, did I detect like a little dot on the left corner of your glasses frame? Is that a camera, Dave? Is that a camera in your glasses?
I wish that I had cameras. These aren't metas. It's actually just a screw. I can hold them up close if you want.
Okay, I just want to check. Just want to check. Not that you're playing any tricks on me with your new glasses there. So
there's a camera in front of me recording me right now, so I don't need a second one of my glasses to record myself. Recording myself.
Yeah, fantastic. So you see that the problem is not simple. It's not simple. Okay, moving on. Goldman Sachs has issued a report that says 6.1% of employees using AI in their jobs. I would add in quotes only. Dave, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because what this is saying is that, like, in terms of your job and how you're using it day by day, this is something where only 6.1% of American companies are using AI to do what they do. So obviously, like someone like a Meta is included in that. But what they're identifying is that companies haven't yet brought AI into their production workload and workforce. They're still exploring it. There's probably lots and lots of companies researching how to use it, but in terms of how they run their companies, this is something where they're not kind of using it in the day-to-day.
Did they share anything in this report about how they measured that 6.1% figure, and especially like what qualifies as using AI in the workplace? Like, what is it? Like, is it only like, does it qualify only if they're using it in their production workflow or in their communication? Like, what's sort of the what are the framework of measuring that, I guess?
Yeah. So what they're looking at is, are they using AI? And this is a report from Seeking Alpha, which is a research institute.
Right.
Are they using AI in their products or services today?
Okay.
So are they not? If you're using ChatGPT, that wouldn't qualify in this context.
Right.
This is in terms of
somehow integrated in their workflow, right?
exactly. If you're Amazon and using AI in your supply chain, that would qualify in this context. But if you're using Apple Intelligence or Google's Gemini to fix your email, that doesn't qualify in this context because that's not a product or service that you're delivering in this.
Is that though? Is like question to you? Is that a true measure of people using AI at work? Like if I do email a third of my day for communicating, maybe a bit of other communication stuff, and I use AI to fix my emails, or to be more productive in getting those emails out, or to be more productive in reading long documents that come in through emails. If that's not counted in, isn't that sort of the number one use case at the moment?
Yeah, and I think that's what that would be harder to measure, I think. So
Right.
that this news article is saying, how can we quantitatively measure
Right.
where AI is used in businesses? Because how would you, I guess, other than if you're Apple or you're Gemini and evaluating use and user base, how would you evaluate in your company how much and how often you're using your AI agent or your intelligence to produce an email? That'd be a hard thing to measure, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, we've had so many inputs now on the growth of adoption of AI, and apparently, lots of people say there hasn't been a project yet where people say this is not going to work for us. We're going to discard AI within our, operation in general. So I think the jury is open for many people. It's pretty clear that it's a disruptive, game-changing technology that will touch every business, but how fast they adopt and how far they integrate deep into their value creation chain is, of course, different for each organization. So it's I guess if they're going to use this same measure next year, in 12 months from now, then we at least have a good comparison, Dave.
Agreed.
All right. So moving on to the last news item for this week. So Financial Times just shared an article that says bosses struggle to police workers' use of AI. Staff are adopting large language models faster than companies can issue guidelines on how to do so. Dave, what is this article about? And I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about how organizations go about managing the adoption of AI from a policy perspective.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So this article is interesting. There's a couple of great quotes. Walmart is one of the companies they cite in this, and Walmart has basically disallowed ChatGPT, not because they don't want their employees to use AI tools.
Right.
They're actually working on building their own internal version so that they can manage the information flow and treat it responsibly. They see the potential in it, but they're kind of managing it. It also goes to kind of the other side of things where there's a great quote from Sarah, a paralegal in a boutique law firm in London. She was surprised, this great quote, was surprised to be asked to research and design the rule book for how her more senior colleagues should be using AI. And this is a direct quote from Sarah. "It's weird that it's become my job," she says. "I'm literally the most junior member of the staff." So I think that's how a lot of organizations are treating AI. Whoever is the new techie person gets to figure this out. And it's not good governance or kind of wise decision-making informing this.
Right.
It's only those people that seem to understand it or have a clue about it that are being given the full carte blanche to make the decisions and rules around this, which I don't think is healthy.
Yeah, so that's super interesting from several perspectives. So I have recently worked with a couple of clients where basically the initial policy is that we can only use Microsoft's CoPilot, but a specially adapted version that has lots of exclusions in it. For instance, employees can only use the AI within Microsoft's CoPilot in the Microsoft Office environment if they don't communicate anything with the outside world that includes certain keywords. So if the company's name, for instance, is, let's make one up, Specialty Tires Inc., and anything is mentioned about Specialty Tires Inc. within an email, then the workflow defines that they're not allowed to use AI to manipulate that document or communicate with the outside world via, let's say, email. And I think it completely defeats the purpose of the abilities of AI to support the workforce. Then what's the point really of doing it at all? I mean, of course, you can maybe craft some internal documents and improve them, or work on a presentation or some phrasing and wording, but there's really diminishing returns at that point. Or do I miss something here from my perspective, Dave? What do you think?
No, I think you're really you're limiting your ability to be competitive in the market if you're not fully embracing these tools. It's like
Right.
not using a word processor and doing everything by hand. We have to
Right.
write all letters by hand to this one company. That's sort of the analogy I would put into this. Times 1,000 probably, assuming that all you do is write letters all day long.
Right.
I think finding ways to give good guidance and good policy around this is super important. And I think identifying the different categories of data you've got in your ecosystem, not enough companies have good labels for their data. What's sensitive, what's not, what's public, what's not.
Right.
That requires training, it requires policy around that. And if you've already got that in place, some of these conversations are really easy. And if you don't, there's just some basic governance and kind of information management you need to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. And that's back to your earlier point there, that the most junior person here with this example in this article gets the task to basically educate the organization on how to use these tools and where to be careful. I think it's certainly, we have been advocating, you and I have been advocating here for on this podcast for a while now, to go with a bottom-up approach to initially learn how these tools work, which ones are the most productive for you, and how to limit your risks, and implement sort of by learning initially without being fully in a production environment. Isolate a project to the side that is outside of your main workflows, and then learn within that sort of safe environment. But what we haven't really talked about, and I think that's just as important, is that top management in any organization of any size, in my opinion, cannot rely on those bottom-up teams, whether they're technical or whether they're sort of product-oriented or whatever, to figure all this out and then learn from them, essentially. Sit back and wait until we learn from them, from that team, how to implement AI in our main workflows. I think from a governance perspective and from a understanding the implications perspective, top management has to go back into the classroom right now and has to learn what these tools can do, what's coming next, and how to approach a sound, government framework to have a roadmap to roll out over the next year, 2 years, 3, 4 years, maybe 4 years is a little bit too far out because things are changing fast. But sort of the two-pronged approach, bottom-up learning on the technical side, on the how to work with this side, but then top-down learning, what does this all mean, and not just like sort of carte blanche say we can't do this because it's too dangerous, or we have to do this because otherwise we can't compete. There has to be the ability first to understand and then hold sometimes 2 or 3 opposing thoughts in management's heads to really fine-tune the right position, how to use, how to implement, and how to develop with these technologies as a core component of every business. Is that the way to put it?
Totally agree. I think because AI cuts across the organization, it doesn't just impact finance, it doesn't impact operations, it impacts every element, and is moving so rapidly. Building a small lab with team members from across your organization, having executive buy-in, having that team learn, try things, and then share that knowledge out with the organization and say, ChatGPT o1 has just come out. Here's what it does. Here's how we can use it safely, and how it gets dangerous in this kind of a use case. If we're putting all our financial information, don't upload all of our corporate financials. Talk about that stuff.
Right.
Create a little working group that does some of this, that figures it out, or supplement your team with experts who can kind of talk about this stuff. Figure out a way to continually adapt. It can't necessarily be a project. You can run certain projects around this, but ideally becomes an operational team that lives in your organization, that gets regular outside insight and learning, and figures out how to make you more competitive. Just like delivering products on the internet has suddenly allowed this great opportunity economically, this is a huge opportunity for most businesses that if they don't take advantage of, they're going to get left behind by all their competitors who are figuring this out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cool. Okay, so I think that closes our news section for today, and we have a really interesting deep dive topic, which I would like Dave to introduce.
Fantastic. So we're talking all about like the brand new emerging models and things like that. But for me, in my regular workflows, one of the tools that I use all the time is something by Google, and it's called NotebookLM. It's something that has been around for a while, about 2 to 3 years. They've prototyped it internally for a while. And there's one new feature that's gotten it really well known and kind of brought in some interesting insights to it that I'll talk about. It's their kind of audio summaries. But in this, it's a really simple tool that basically allows you to create a folder. And so you can see I've got 7 folders here on the screen. You can create a new one. It's really simple and allows you to add resources to it. So if I flip over here and open up, I've got a bank of PDFs that I can add from my desktop. So I'm just going to pull one of those in and show just some research on technology and media outlook. I drop that into this notebook. You can see it's kind of processing it here over on the left. This is my list of sources for this. And as I get into the information here, there's a number of different features I can do here. I can ask it questions right here in the center, and you can see it's still spinning, so it hasn't finished processing that. But once I can ask questions just like an LLM, but it's specific to this document. So you can see as it's finished that processing, it renames this project to Activate Technology and Media Outlook 2025. It has a summary here. I can ask, it starts to suggest questions I should ask about this, like what key trends shape future tech and media growth. And it's not going to go out to the internet or to an LLM and all of its knowledge. It's going to use the power of a language model on this particular document. So it kind of gives me this whole insight into, several key trends and goes through them. So it summarized this document really quickly. On the right over here, I can have it generate a briefing document or a timeline. So if this was a historical document, I can get a timeline of that. I can get a frequently asked questions or a study guide. So if I'm a student or I'm learning about a business or a new mutual fund that I want to invest in, and I've pulled a whole bunch of documents together about a company, I could dump them in here and produce a study guide. But the really interesting one is up here, where if you hit generate, this will go off in the background and generate like a podcast-like conversation about this topic. So it takes a few minutes. It's incredibly fast, but still takes a few minutes. So I'll bounce over to another one here around travel trends. So you can see here I've added a few documents here from reports in the future around what travel trends might look like. It's summarized that, these 13 sources, it kind of brings that together. I've got this briefing note and study guide around kind of what that looks like. But this interesting kind of podcast comes through. I'll see if we can play a bit of the audio and hear that. So it's really interesting. What it does is it has 2 voices that go back and forth and talk about things. And I listened to the DeepMind team talk about how they put this together. And they spent a lot of time thinking about the pauses we have in conversations, the way we repeat ourselves. And I was listening to a couple of these, and it's so curious because the voices, these automatic AI-generated voices, look for what's interesting in these documents and talk about it. And what they do is I've heard these really interesting vocal tics they do, where sometimes they'll repeat a phrase 3 times in a row. They'll do that as it's in this auto-generated text. It's so fascinating to listen to because it helps. Like, it gives you these pauses, and if it's a really interesting point they're trying to make, they'll use more of a pause or take a little bit more time in their conversation to deliver that information to you. It's really curious.
And
Peter, have you tried any of these?
I've tried this, yes. And I remember, like, it's been maybe a year back when NotebookLM was only available in limited fashion. I think we already talked about it back then as a research tool, and we get into this in a minute. What is it good for and what is it not good for? But I think it's really this audio feature is really impressive, and it leads me to one thing that I've been now observing with all these automated voice or AI character voice features. I think there is an interesting psychological aspect to this, which is that these voice conversations that are auto-created here as a report or as a podcast style conversation about any document that you share with or that you upload to NotebookLM, they're really impressive and they're really good in terms of their ability to summarize and get something like get a high-level overview of, let's say, a very complex document or a set of documents on a specific topic. However, when I listen to them, and I'm curious how you feel about this, Dave, is that when I listen to them, I sort of am impressed by, like you say, the intonation and the way the subject is discussed and how well they do to imitate truly human conversation. However, what I find interesting mostly is in the back of my head, I know this is a robot talking. I know this is essentially artificial, and therefore I'm not putting as much weight to listening to it, and I quickly lose focus on listening to it because I'm thinking, well, this is just an LLM created conversation, so it's not real humans having this conversation. And then sort of it really takes more effort for me to actually pay attention to the content and stick with it and actually take something out of it. Is that something you've experienced as well?
Yeah, so my process has been I've used this a lot to kind of get up to speed on projects or on background information. And I find if I'm not taking active notes, which is funny that I'm listening to this and it's got all the information there, but I'm writing notes in my notebook, my paper notebook with
Yes.
pencils, which is kind of funny.
Right.
I find that as a tool for me to keep my focus and sort of pull out of it what's interesting.
Right.
The other thing that was really helpful for me is listening to the Deep Mind folks talk about. They asked a fascinating question: is what they talk about in those podcasts that it auto generates is what it finds interesting. And so they asked, how does the LLM define what's interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Which I found very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And their answer helped me focus as well. Because what they say is basically this tool has read the entire internet, all knowledge that we kind of have around.
Right.
And it understands what is common and what is uncommon.
Right.
So if it's talking about something that's everyday and mundane, it's not going to highlight that in the same way. What it's going to focus on is what is uncommon or less frequent in this document and highlight and surface that.
Right.
So really, it's a way for all of us to get a shortcut to look at what is the most interesting thing that this document talks about.
Right.
And it just focuses on that. So that actually helped me think this is worth my time to look at. It helped me think, is it worth my time and energy? And yes, because it's gone through and done the hard work of identifying what's interesting about this.
Okay, great. Well, that makes sense. And with that in mind, I think it's maybe, like you say, a little bit easier to really pay attention instead of just dismissing it as something artificially created in random fashion. So I think that's really good. Okay, then let me ask you a couple of questions on your experience with this. What is Google NotebookLM good for, in your opinion, and where is it maybe where are its weaknesses? So let's start with where do you see the most benefit and how do I use it in my business?
Great question. It's really effective at getting up to speed quickly, summarize. If you've got a lot of documents to read through,
right,
and you want to get a sense of where should I start,
right,
it's great for that. Essentially, there's a bunch of limitations to it, like it can't read spreadsheets, it can't read certain audio files, you can't have more than 50 documents or a document with more than 500,000 words or 200 megabytes in size.
Okay.
So all of those exceed the limits of the tool. So really, it's great if you've got like a marketing project that you're looking at, or
right,
you've started with a new company and they've got a whole marketing background. You want to get up to speed on your first day.
right.
It's perfect for that. Or if there's a bunch of research documents and you're looking at, is this company worth us exploring, and how do I summarize this right before a meeting? It's excellent for that.
Right.
And it's good because it segments it down into these folders you can create, and you can keep one from the other. So if you're working with 3 or 4 different clients or projects, they are nicely packaged and independent. Google has, as much as you trust them, is saying that they're not training on this. It's private and secure, and
Right.
it's only to you. I still wouldn't put very sensitive corporate information in there,
Right.
but it is saying that this is somewhere where you can drop some information and some files, process through it, and they won't use that information.
Yeah, so what I'm reading from what you're saying is that it's ideal for the project before the project. Like it's to dive into a subject matter, to really get your hands wet, and to understand what a project or a task or let's say let's say a task is all about, and then before you go deep into it and really do your work, it gives you that ideal introduction. Is that what you're saying, Dave?
100%. It's great for research and context.
Right.
In fact, those two kind of tasks. It's less great for collaboration. If I
Right.
wanted to put this together and share it with you, that's pretty clumsy right now in terms
Right.
of there's no good share mechanism for us both to work on the project.
Correct. Yeah.
And if there's lots of information, the other thing it's really good at is connecting to Google Drive documents. So if you had a whole bunch of Google Docs, a whole bunch of slides in the Google format, easy to connect to that folder, pull all those in and have it summarized for you. It's clumsy in that if you change any of those documents, it doesn't know about it. You'd have to go back to the tool and say, hey, learn this new information. This document's now changed. If information updates, it doesn't automatically sync. So it's not for production level information. It's not for kind of big corporate projects.
Right.
But for you and I to get up to speed quickly,
Yeah.
it is good for that.
What fantastic! So it's a great tool for consultants or for getting preparing a project internally in an organization, and diving into new topics, new subjects, and ingesting a large portion of material really quickly to get an overview of what's going on, and then interact with that. What we haven't mentioned, actually, what I think is one of the strongest features, is that when it does these summaries in text, like you just saw, and you have a conversation with the model about the content of the documents that are in the notebook, it actually creates references for each major statement that it makes, right? And so it references then back to the document. Maybe we can share that on the screen real quick, and show how that works, because I think that's actually super important. It's one thing to get a summary of a model that makes a claim about something in a set of documents or data, but then if there's no direct reference, it's sometimes hard to follow up on these things. So Dave, can you share that with us?
That's a great point. So I asked how will air travel change in this kind of all these different documents predicting how travel will change in the future. And you can see it's making these statements with these little numbers behind.
Right.
And I can either hover over them and it shows me the document that this is from and the quote in the section, or I can click on it and it opens up its summary of that document and shows me highlighted exactly where it's referencing that.
Right.
So in each of these, I could go and read further and say, what else does this document say around this, or refer to this specific thing and quote from that. So I find that in terms of the potential of this hallucinating or having false information, way more useful to build trust and find out, are all my different questions being answered by one document? Say it's this Skift Megatrends 2025 that answers all the questions that I've got. Maybe it's worth my time to read that whole document because it's useful information for the kinds of questions that I've got.
Yeah. And that's where I think, quick introduction, get an overview, figure out what's important, and then allow you to deep dive into those sections that are most interesting to you without having to go through a multiple 100-page document in the first place. So I think that's like we said, it's really good for introducing yourself to new information, new content, getting a good overview, and tackling the things that matter to your activity, task, or project. So that's great. So is it so on the side of maybe where it's not so strong, if I understand it correctly, is it truly multimodal? can it, let's say if I have a long financial report with lots of charts in it, does it include reading the charts itself, or would it solely focus on the text that's readable from that document?
It really depends on what format that's in. So again, you can upload a PDF, a text file, Markdown, audio, or Google Docs or slides. You can kind of see the different formats it takes here. A website.
Right.
You can add YouTube videos. So one thing I've used this for a lot is adding 2 or 3 like if there's a 2-hour, 3-hour YouTube video, and I want a summary, especially if it's several interviews with one person. If I was an interviewer wanting to get background on someone,
Right.
I could put 7 other YouTube videos in there for 40 hours of total video, let's say,
Yeah.
and get a 30-minute summary of what's most interesting about that person,
Right.
and prepare myself well for that conversation.
Right. That's
So
fantastic.
depending on what your context is, there's a lot of opportunities in that.
Right.
But exactly how it handles tables and information, again, it's a little opaque of what it's going to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And reading images like charts, have you seen that working, or is that unknown at this point?
If a chart is an image, I haven't had it give me good information around that.
Okay.
But it will interpret images. So
Okay.
if you had images in your information, it can give you a kind of a whatever a computer thinks about that image.
Right.
But if there's data in those rasterized files, then I haven't had it give me good response to that.
Okay, fantastic. That's great to hear. So anything that you said collaboratively, it's not recommended. Highly sensitive information, of course, it goes up into the big the grand Google Cloud. Depends on your trust towards that. You can do it in your account. Is it integrated already as one of the available tools in Google Workspaces, or is it only on personal accounts that it's available at this point?
Yeah, so it depends is the short answer, as it always is the case.
Yes.
For most of us, if you have a Gmail account, it is accessible to you. For a lot of corporate accounts, this is disabled by default, or your administrator can put this on. Your administrator has to allow this as something that you'll be able to use.
Yeah.
So it really depends on who you are and what you've got set up and where you're working. Sometimes corporations turn this off. Sometimes you have it. But if you have a personal account, you can always spin this up and give it a try and explore it to see what information you can get from it.
Yeah. Okay. So great. I have kind of put it aside a little bit because, like I said, I was really early into using it, and I think I shared it first with you like way back when it was still only available in a limited fashion. And then I was a bit sort of, not put off, but I thought there was too many limitations at the time, but it's really grown in terms of feature set and capabilities. So I'll bring it back into my workflow now and see how it goes. And I looked at it just prior to this episode, and I think the ability to pull in YouTube videos, which it's of course a big source of information that for most of us is very rich, but then in the same time a lot of information is hidden in long tail information, long tail videos, which are sometimes hard to retrieve when you want to pinpoint that information at a later stage. So that this might be one of the tools that's really great for that. Now, having worked with this a little bit more intensely recently, Dave, what would be the number one feature that you would love to have in there that's not there yet? Any thoughts?
Yeah, the as an app, the one thing I notice is that it's really nice to be able to get these audio summaries.
Right.
And based on how they work, you can actually interrupt the speakers as they're going and ask questions. So at this fascinating interactive mode where if it was halfway through a topic, I could ask a question verbally or in text of it. And what they would do is treat it like a caller into the show. They'd be like, hey, someone's just called in and asked this question.
Is that's working already, or that?
It is, yeah. So you can use that today,
Oh, wow.
essentially.
I didn't know that.
So it's a great feature. There's an interactive mode that's in beta. It's still emerging, and they're kind of like giving the beta label to it, but it's a really fun thing to have as an option. What I wish is that it came in an app on my phone, because it's great to listen to this, but what I tend to do is put some documents into it, and then while I'm going to do the laundry or cook dinner or something like that, that's where I'd most like to have this information, or driving in my car.
Right.
That's where I'd most like to have this information, do that learning, get those insights.
Right.
And I kind of have to be at my desk, and hopefully my Bluetooth headset takes me far enough away that I can go and do those errands around the house.
Right.
But if I could build myself a playlist of podcasts of information, or get playlists of podcasts that you are interested or others are interested in, what documents have they summarized? What learning are they doing? Or Sundar, in terms of what they're curious about in this. I think that's a real opportunity in this.
That's super cool. Yes. So at the moment, when you, let's say you prepare for a longer car ride, do you export the audio and then take that with you, or is that not possible at this point?
At this point, that's not a possibility. So again, these you can download it and take it with you, but it not in
It's
that
not
interactive mode.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to get into a file. It's not simple and easy. It'd be great to have that just with you on a phone, and it's kind of a clumsy interface to get into, given its complexity on your mobile device. So it is possible. It's just not smooth and simple today, and I think that would be a real opportunity. And sharing audio as well as make it super simple to just listen to on your phone.
Yes, fantastic. All right, I think that kind of concludes today our deep dive topic on Notebook LM, something that's been talked about quite a bit, but we try to get you a little bit deeper into what's possible with it and how to apply it to your business. I think the summary for me is it's a tool that I definitely have to have in on my desktop, available to accelerate my introducing myself into new topics and doing research, as well as preparing maybe for a larger project. So that's great thing to have. And even though I looked at it the last couple of days, I still learned a few new things from you, Dave, today, having worked with it more intensely over the last few weeks. Great to hear. Notebook LM, people, get into it, try it out, play with it. Let us know in the comments what you think of it. So that would be great. Dave, anything else we should ask or bring up for concluding this week's episode? First one in 2025.
Can't wait to see what this year brings. There's a ton of new information with the new administration stepping into the White House.
Yesterday,
it's
yes.
hard to keep up with all that information dropping and all the new projects that are being kicked off. Some fascinating things to maybe look at next episode in our news.
Yeah. It's a wild ride. And it's going to be, I think the next 5 years, maybe 10 years are going to be intense, scary, exciting. And the ability to hold all these conflicting thoughts in your head and deal with it, I think, are going to be one of the major skills in life and in running businesses and in management. And I'm excited to face those challenges for myself, with our clients, as well as in everyday life, in with my family and everything that's happening around us. Where there is challenge and where there is drama, there's also always opportunity, and that's what I try to focus on, of course. Dave, great to get started with a new episode in a new year. What are you looking forward to in this week until we record again next week? Anything coming up?
Warmer temperatures outside.
Yes, please.
The old Greek and Stoic statement that's both a blessing and a curse at the same time, which is, may you live in interesting times. I think that's our current reality.
Yes. Like a rolling stone.
How about you, Peter?
I just had this analogy in my head for a while now. It's a little bit like, how people used to say, you got to have a crystal ball in order to see what's coming next. And some people claim that they have it and others don't and would like to have it. I think for me, the crystal ball has become the cannonball we have to ride through this. That's kind of the image I have in my head, like the big hat and the cigar, and then you try to hold on to this crystal ball flying through the world at light speed, and that's how life feels like a little bit to me, both on the exciting side and on the I don't want to fall down and break my neck side kind of thing. So I look forward to it. And for the next week, I don't know. I mean, there's so much happening and lots to catch up on. The first couple of weeks have been extremely busy with new projects and clients. And we've talked about it. I hear it's the same for you, Dave. So I'm really looking forward to just tackle a couple of interesting stuff, and I think I want to put a little bit of my time into actually experiencing these tools and the new stuff coming out and playing with it. Like I said, spinning up a machine where I install an agent that's going to mess around with my screen. I think it'll be fun, and hopefully we can share more of that in the upcoming episodes.
Yeah, I think we have to take some of our own advice and get into these tools and explore them and see what they're good at and what the possibilities are, because it's super exciting. But I think my next task is definitely going to be using Gen AI to see if I can get an image of you riding a crystal ball, smoking a cigar,
Let's
with a
do it.
fantastic hat on.
Let's do it. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for listening today. We're coming up on an hour, so I think that's a good time to call this an episode. Please, everybody that's been listening so far, we appreciate you all so much. Thank you. You know who you are, and we know who you are. We are still at the beginning of this podcast, so we sometimes even hear personally from you how much and what you appreciate about that we're doing here. So please, if you're out there and we don't know you, leave comments. Let us know what you are looking forward for us to tackle next. And what are your experiences implementing AI in your business and in your daily workflows? Also, please help us out and like and subscribe. Click the bell icon so that the algorithm is going to pick us up and we're going to carry this forward. We have good plans for this year for AI Mavens to move up and to the right, and it's going to be exciting. I can say that for sure. So love to have this new episode in the can and talk to you on the next one. Thank you very much and have a good day, everybody. Dave, see you later.
Great conversation, Peter. Thank you as always. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.